Normally, at the start of the episode, you would hear the introduction, but since we're in this time of transition, we need to, give our new hosts the power of the Bat Jar before we hear the introduction with them in it. So, Ben the Movie Buff, it's good to see you here.
Hey, how are you? My name is Ben, and I'm a movie buff. Thank you for having me here.
Are you ready for this?
I am. Let's do it.
All right, so I'm only going to give you like half of the power that's in the sword because the other half has to go to the other guy who will be debuting next week.
All right, fair enough.
So, hope you're ready. Here we go.
Thank you for knighting me.
My name is Average Joe, and I'm a proud geek with expertise in movies, superheroes, and animation.
Hey, how are you? My name is Ben, and I am a movie buff. I am one part video game nerd, one part comic book nerd, but all parts movie nerd.
Our mission is to bring nerd culture to the masses
by putting it all under the microscope.
Welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast.
Movies, TV, manga, comic books, or is that graphic novels, cartoons, groups, that's animation, Disney, Star Wars, Dragon Ball Z, Pokemon, and Digimon, and Mighty Morphin, Power Rangers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Nintendo, Cinematic Universes, Marvel, DC, Justice League, is Batman, Leagues with Superman, Flash, Wonder Woman, Avengers, Iron Man, Captain Troll, Loki, Spider-Man, and Hulk, and Logan, X-Men, Battlers, and the Galaxy Guardians, Star Trek, Trick, Card, and Janeway, Nerds and Geeks come gather around and join them in the Big Bat Jar.
Hello there, and welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast, where we put nerd culture under the microscope. And based on the introduction you guys that have just listened to and that little cold open, we don't usually have cold opens on the podcast, but, whatever, times are changing. Mm-hmm. So for the first time, I'll welcome one of our regular co-hosts, Ben the Movie Buff.
Hey, how are you? Thank you for having me, Joe, as always. This is loads of fun.
Are you excited about your new role on the show? Do you feel like you have more power than normal?
I guess so. It's cool. I like being on here, so it'll be fun that I get to do this more often than I used to. It seems to me I'd come on like once or twice every year, so the fact that I'll be coming on more regularly, despite the craziness of having our son, which is coming in a few weeks. Due date is the same date of
That's
Lion
crazy.
King. Yeah, so we're getting pretty close. But yes, it'll be good to be here more
That's
often.
probably a great way to induce birth is go to the Lion King and just like, ah!
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll get 5 seconds in and my wife will say, "It's time to go, Ben." But it's the Lion King, Kayla. But then, of course, 2 seconds later, I'll be like, "Just kidding, let's go." Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it at the same level that I look forward to all the Disney live action.
Well, hopefully
remakes.
a little more than most of them.
Well, slightly more, I suppose. Like, I'm just, you know what I think is kind of cool is the fact that James Earl Jones is coming back to reprise the same role he had in the 1994 animated Lion King. I think that's cool. I don't know how many movie remakes have the same actor playing the same role. Sometimes they come in for a cameo or maybe a different role, but the same role, I feel like that's rare. So I think that'll be kind of cool to see. Does he just do his lines the same way, or does he do them differently because it's a new iteration?
I saw an interview with Jon Favreau, who's the director of this movie, and he made some kind of comment about how the fact that even though it's James Earl Jones again, like, he's obviously much older, and so his voice has a different timbre and a different quality to it.
Yeah.
So it'll be similar but different. And frankly, that's probably for the better, because I remember when I saw Rogue One and Darth Vader shows up in Rogue One, I could tell instantly that Darth Vader all of a sudden sounded way older than he had previously. Like Revenge of the Sith, when he's in there at the end, sounds fine.
Yeah.
Some of the lines he has aren't the greatest, but
right.
But by the time Rogue One rolled around, you could easily tell that this man was way older than he was.
Yeah, it was 11 years in between Revenge of the Sith and Rogue One, so, people age.
So tell me if you've heard this one before, because we're going to be talking about a movie that came out this summer. That's the fourth in a series.
Yep.
I feel like we've been here before.
Yep.
And it's not the best one in the series.
Yeah, but okay, so for now I'll say yes. Obviously I'll get into more detail later on, but yeah, I can kind of get on board with that.
So we're talking about Toy Story 4 today, and I don't know how I feel about this thing. I don't feel as positively about it as I do other movies I've seen this year.
Okay.
I just kind of try to make a comparison to Men in Black International.
Right.
It's not nearly as bad as Men in Black International.
Here.
Let's just get that out of the way.
Yep.
But it should have been better.
Yeah.
That's my hot take.
Interesting.
Before we
Okay.
even get into it.
All right.
And we should get into it by actually talking about our history with this franchise.
Absolutely.
I was a small child when the first Toy Story came out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming you were as well.
6 years old, yeah.
And I had no idea that this was a computer animated film. I don't even think as a kid I was really aware of the fact that it was a different kind of animation.
Right.
To me, it was just an animated movie.
Yep.
Did you have that kind of sense, like, oh, this is... Because it is the first computer animated feature film.
Yes.
But I don't know. Like I said, as a kid, I couldn't tell that it was something different.
Yeah, it seems to me that as a kid, from what I can remember about my experience of going to see the first Toy Story, was that I didn't know it was exactly computer animated, but I knew it was different, right? Like, I was the kind of kid that I grew up on a lot of the Disney animated features. Like, I don't remember this, but I apparently saw Aladdin when it came into theaters. I saw Beauty and the Beast when it came into theaters, and Lion King. So I think my eye recognized what hand-drawn animation looked like. So once I saw a preview for Toy Story, which, if I remember correctly, I think is on the Cinderella VHS, the Disney Cinderella, I remember seeing the preview and just being flabbergasted because I didn't understand exactly what it was, but I knew it was different. So that alone was enough for me to say, like, what is this? Show me more. I've got to see what this is all about.
Toy Story was the first movie from an animation studio called Pixar, which, of course, I feel like a lot of people now are very familiar with Pixar. They kind of know what to expect when they go and see a Pixar movie.
Yep.
But back then, in 95, like, Pixar was more or less unknown. It was this computer company that George Lucas sold off to Steve Jobs and some other people. And they, from the software that this company had, they developed computer animation. So, you know, at the time, this movie was a huge success. Apparently, it was like the highest grossing film in 1995.
Yes.
Beating out things like Batman Forever, which at the time broke the record for highest opening weekend.
That's right. Yeah.
So it certainly, I don't know, it continued the trend of the Disney Renaissance in the sense that it was an animated film that appealed to all ages.
Yeah.
And I think cleverly, like, I mean, for one thing, on a practical level, making your story about inanimate objects allowed you to kind of hide the weaknesses of your animation.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if all your characters are made of plastic, it's okay if they look like they're plastic.
Exactly. That's why Monsters, Inc. was their fourth Pixar movie and not their first, because the fur and the different textures and whatnot, that obviously can get very tricky when you're still learning how to kind of do this animation. But something like plastic, that's why they started off with toys.
Like, I haven't seen Toy Story the first one in many years, but I've people put clips of it on YouTube, and it's like you see the occasional shots of the human characters, and oh boy,
yeah,
whew.
Andy's friends all look like him, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah, and they look a little terrifying.
Yeah, that's right.
But no, I think the idea of setting a movie around toys was not only just a practical thing for their animation, but also there's this element of nostalgia. Most people, growing up in North America at least, have the experience of growing up with toys.
Yeah.
So whether you're a child yourself playing with toys at the time, or you're an adult and you can kind of connect to the nostalgia of the toys.
Yes.
I think that was a great way to kind of make a movie that had that all ages appeal.
Yes.
However, as a kid, I was sort of off-put by the way that Andy played with his toys, because I don't know, maybe I'm just a weirdo, but basically I didn't do crossovers with my toys. Like, it's like I had my Batman toys, and I only ever did Batman stuff with them. And I had my Beast Wars toys, and they only ever did Beast Wars things. And I had my Power Rangers toys, and they did their Power Rangers things. And their Ninja Turtles, I never like put them all together.
Right.
And I also was not very imaginative. Like, I didn't have, all the toys I had were based on some show I watched.
Right.
I didn't have like a Mr. Potato Head or these kind of generic toys. So when I'm watching Toy Story, I'm like, oh, is this how you're supposed to play with these things? Like, just put all your toys together and like create some kind of elaborate scenario for them to all be in the same universe. And then on top of that, actually being able to enjoy like a piggy bank as a toy.
Right.
Or those Slinky Dog things. So I was kind of like, I would say I was almost off-put by the way Andy played with his toys. I'm like, that doesn't seem right. Like, that's not the way I do it. Am I doing it wrong?
And it's funny you mentioned that, because I actually have a picture of me as like a 4-year-old on my fridge at home currently that has me playing. In the one hand, I have Michelangelo, one of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And then I think in the other hand, I have Belle from Beauty and the Beast. And then I think in the background, you can see some Star Wars toys. So I think I was of the mindset of Andy, where I had all these different toys from different franchises and such. And I just thought, bring them all together. So, yeah, I played a lot like that.
So you were much of the mind of the crossover. You were like, yeah.
That's right. I was all about crossovers before I knew that. Before I knew the exciting crossovers I'd be seeing in movies. A decade or two later.
Do you have like a fondness for your toys? Do you remember? Do you have like a Woody to an Andy? Do you have that kind of relationship with a toy?
Woody was my Woody.
You had a Woody?
I had a Woody doll. Now, I mean, this obviously after the first movie came out, but as a kid, how you'd go to McDonald's, you go to one of those fast food restaurants, and it'd be like, collect all 6 toys. The first Toy Story movie was the only time that I actually collected all 6 toys. Like, I was so obsessed with Toy Story.
McDonald's celebrates Walt Disney's Toy Story, the first ever computer animated motion picture. With every McDonald's Happy Meal, you can get Woody, Buzz, Bo Peep, or Rex. Collect these characters with your McDonald's Happy Meal.
And I did get a Woody doll that following Christmas, and yeah, I treated the Woody doll like Andy treated his Woody doll. And I mean, like, I liked Buzz and all, but Woody was always and still is my favorite. So Woody, yeah, he was the toy that I probably spent the most time playing with when Toy Story came out.
Did you put your name on his foot?
Probably. I can't remember exactly, but I can see my 6-year-old self being like, yeah, I'm going to be just like Andy, Ben on the one boot. So yeah, I probably did.
Because, again, that's another thing. I don't feel like I have one toy that I had, like, such an emotional attachment to.
Yeah.
I think I kind of had, like, my toys were in waves, like, based on, again, like, the shows I was watching, the things I was interested in. I remember, like, toys I liked having. I remember things I really wanted for Christmas. But I don't think I ever played with a toy for more than 2 years. And maybe that says something about, like, the disposable lifestyle I had as a child. Maybe I just didn't know how to appreciate the things I had. But it just was another thing that, like, was, like, I thought watching Toy Story as a kid, I'm like, this is interesting because this is not... Like, this approach to playing is different than what I used to always do.
Yeah, so even though I was obsessed with Toy Story, and I mean, it helped that the second Toy Story came out 4 years after the first one, so I was still young enough to be playing with those toys. But I do remember, as I got a little older, and when the Star Wars prequels came out, I did kind of graduate from the Toy Story toys to the action figures of Star Wars. And, like, we've all heard how people feel about the prequels and whatnot, but as a kid... Like, I absolutely love the prequels, and I remember giving my mom $40 because like I was doing some sort of gymnastics lessons, and I gave her $40, and I gave her a list of, like, in priority of the Star Wars toys that I wanted from Star Wars Attack of the Clones. So she went out and she got them for me, and those toys. Like, yeah, I couldn't be separated from them. I bring them with me outside to play. I'd bring them with me to bed. But yeah, for a while it was the Toy Story toys, and then after that it was like the Star Wars action figures. Obi-Wan was like probably still one of my favorite characters. So I guess Obi-Wan was the new Woody, if you will.
You sound like a very smart man.
Well, thanks. I try.
Obi-Wan's my favorite as well. That's why I say that.
He's the best.
When's that movie coming?
That's right, the Obi-Wan movie. Come on, Lucasfilm.
I think they're just trying to save money. Like, let Ewan McGregor continually age so that they can spend less money on digital aging and even makeup.
Maybe that, yeah.
But, like, just do it now.
I know, yeah. Waiting. Come on, we want it. Yep, give us our Obi-Wan movie, please.
Yeah. Don't make it a streaming show on Disney Plus, please.
Yeah. That's right. Give us a cinematic experience.
Yeah. Okay, so Toy Story 2, yeah, as you said, came out 4 years after the first.
Yep.
I don't know if I saw the first Toy Story in theaters, but I definitely saw the second.
Yeah.
And even as a kid, like, I didn't really understand all the complexities of the story.
Mm-hmm.
The story.
Yeah.
But I do remember enjoying it, and I thought it was a lot of fun. And you know what? Like, as I think about it, like, as Andy grew up, basically I was growing up as well. To the fact that I saw Toy Story 3 the same week that I graduated from high school.
Oh, man.
And I saw it with my parents and one of my brothers.
Yep.
The other one had to work.
All right.
And he often reminds us of the fact that we went and did things without him while he was at work.
Oh, gee. Oh, I've been there before. It's all good.
And there's a scene in Toy Story 3 where, like, his mom goes into his room and, like, it's all empty and she starts crying.
Yeah.
And, like, that just, everyone was like, because I was the oldest of my family, so, like, we were all kind of, we had just lived my high school graduation. We're realizing this is going to be happening to us.
In a few months, yeah.
And we were like, we were all in tears. And I was not, I felt things watching the first two Toy Stories, but Toy Story 3, man, like, that had the feels.
Yeah, definitely.
Had me crying. I'm not ashamed to admit it. Toy Story 3 made me cry.
Yeah, well, that's fair.
And it ended in a way that the franchise kind of was saying goodbye.
Yep.
Right? It was like they're capping off the trilogy. and you never really expected this to be a trilogy because you kind of had the first two and then like a decade where nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, part of why it took them so long to make Toy Story 3 is because they had this deal with Disney where they had to produce 5 original films. So from from Toy Story up until I think it was The Incredibles was the last. No, Cars was the last of their 5-picture deal.
Okay.
And it was shortly after Cars came out that Disney ended up buying Pixar.
Right.
And then part of the mandate under Disney's ownership was to follow up with more sequels to their original films.
Right.
Which is how we got sequels to so many Pixar movies.
Yeah.
Because up until that point in 2007, the only sequel they'd done was Toy Story 2. So it was kind of abnormal for them to be doing sequels.
Yep, that's right.
So when they announced Toy Story 3 and it came out, what was your reaction to it?
I was just excited to get more Toy Story. I love Pixar, and I would go to see every Pixar movie in the theaters, except for the occasional. I'm pretty sure I missed The Incredibles in theaters, strangely enough. But I'd seen every other Pixar movie in theaters. I've seen most of them.
If you told me you skipped The Good Dinosaur, I'd understand. But The Incredibles?
Yeah, no, I know. For some reason, it just didn't happen. Go figure. But I do remember when I heard that Toy Story 3 was coming out. I was very excited because I was just wondering, what do they do with the story next? Because I absolutely love the first 2 Toy Story movies, and I thought Toy Story 3 has some big shoes to fill. We've seen in cases before, like in X-Men, X-Men 2, X-Men The Last Stand, and then the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, how they get off to a good start with the first or second movie, and then the third movie is either decent or okay, but not as good as the movies that preceded it. So I was a little nervous, but I just hoped I hope this is going to be good. It was. It absolutely was.
It got
I was
nominated
very
for
satisfied.
Best Picture.
Yes.
Not even just Best Animated, but Best Picture. And that's a whole nother conversation. We'll go into that now.
Absolutely.
But I was amazed with the original trilogy. We basically have to call it that now. The original trilogy of Toy Story. Is how they kept finding new ways to somehow explore the identity politics and the worldview of toys.
Yeah.
Just when you think Toy Story 1 deals with kind of the conflict of this new toy coming into the room, and it's a great kind of parallel to the space race and how people stopped caring about westerns when sci-fi became a thing.
Yeah.
And then you go from there to dealing with your mortality as a toy and saying okay, realistically your kid's going to grow up, you're going to have a limited amount of time where you can do this before, and you have to ask yourself what's next. And they, kind of like the end of the first Spider-Man, it's with full knowledge that there's going to be an end to this, I'm going to commit to this.
Yeah.
And then Toy Story 3 brings us to that conclusion. Okay, we knew this was going to come. We knew the kid was going to age up. Yeah. And now it's what do we do with ourselves? And they present the daycare as this is one thing that can happen to you if your kid ages up. Right. And I just couldn't believe that they kept finding new ways to unpack the philosophy and the psychology of these inanimate objects.
Yeah, I think that's part of the appeal to the Toy Story movies. I've found is that even though they have a lot of jokes that can appeal to kids, and they've got lots of colorful characters and they're toys, right? So if you like the toys you see on screen, you'd be begging your parents the next day to drive out to Walmart to actually buy those toys and have them with you. But yeah, the stories have impressed me time and time again that they seem to be about pretty important things that I feel like everyone's going to kind of deal with, right? What happens when you're on top and someone else kind of comes in and they threaten your position, right? How hard are you going to fight for your position? Or is there a time for everything where you have to kind of step back and be accepting of the fact that maybe someone else is going to be, the new leader, or the new favorite or whatnot? And these were themes that really resonated with me, even as a kid, and even as I still, I kind of revisited all the Toy Story movies before I saw Toy Story 4 a few days ago. And it's incredible how well they hold up and how impactful they are for kids and for adults.
It's true what you say. It is very rare for films in a series to kind of just gradually get better.
Yeah.
It's you use the example of the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans. It's first one was good, second one's great, and then the third one, they tried to do too much. Producers got too involved and forced Venom down our throats, and it was a mess.
Yeah, and it didn't have the same impact that the other two did. I think we all wanted Spider-Man 3 to be better.
So I think with Toy Story 4, when it was first announced, I was I think like a lot of people, I was like, really? Like, what? You money grubbing
That's right.
jerks?
Yeah. Another one? Okay, come on, guys.
You guys are just trying to get milk and the money out of us. Like, why
Yep.
ruin a good thing? It had a great conclusion. Like, you don't need to keep continuing this.
Yep.
Did you feel the same way, or were you more kind of open to the idea?
I was scared. I mean, part of me is open and excited because it means I get to see some of my favorite characters again from the Toy Story franchise. But, you know, after Toy Story 3, I was satisfied. I felt like that was good. You know, as much as I like more, I don't really need any more. And then they announced a 4th movie, and I was like, okay, best of luck, Pixar.
And like, I knew I was going to end up seeing it regardless. I'm like, there's no going to boycott Toy Story.
Right, yeah.
But the first trailers that came out really highlighted Forky, one of the new characters, and then the Ducky and Bunny, the other two new characters. And so, and I was kind of off foot because I'm like, these seem like much more kind of silly characters than what we're used to seeing in Toy Story. And it almost felt like there was like going to be a tonal shift happening or like a change in direction. It's like, okay, maybe this is like the start of like a new, like this is like an X-Men First Class where it's like it's starting a new, new series and they're going in a different direction.
Yep.
So I was optimistic but skeptical. And I don't know, did you have more of a conviction that it was going to be good, or were you scared?
Yeah, after I saw the initial trailer to, like, basically up until the last 2 months before the movie came out, I was still very much scared, right? Because I didn't want another case of Spider-Man or X-Men, right? Where it's like the first 3 movies of this franchise are great, and then the 4th one is like, yeah, it was okay. Like, I don't want an okay Toy Story movie. I want a great Toy Story movie. And that's what happens when they keep on coming back with consistent quality for the first, the second, the third. So I was still hopeful, but I was really scared.
Yeah, and you openly admitted to being a Woody fan.
Yes.
I've always been more of a Buzz Lightyear fan.
Oh, interesting.
To the point where I had the video cassette for the Buzz Lightyear spin-off series.
Yes, yeah, I had that too. Yeah,
Buzz Lightyear of Star Command. The Adventure Begins.
Yeah.
And that was that was the pilot basically for the Buzz Lightyear cartoon that went on for a few years.
Yeah.
And I never watched the cartoon, but I loved that first movie.
Stand the suspense! Disney and Pixar presents Buzz Lightyear of Star Command. The Adventure Begins, starring Tim Allen.
I must overcome the evil Emperor Zurg, the sworn enemy of the Galactic Alliance.
It's the story of the real Buzz Lightyear
You don't look so fat when they draw you that way.
and the Space Rangers of Star Command.
Life or death struggle in the cold fastness of outer space.
Premiering only on video and Disney DVD, August 8th.
To infinity and beyond.
Yes.
It's got Newman from Seinfeld as the villain. And,
Yeah, that's right.
And it was a ton of fun. And so I've always liked Buzz Lightyear. And I think part of why we're going to have different opinions about Toy Story 4
I think so,
comes
yeah.
down to that.
Yeah.
So getting into this movie itself, pretty much, like I was like the critic. This is a situation where like I feel like the critics are blind, or they just like they're kind of put under like it's Pixar, we have to love it.
Yeah.
A plus.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've looked at what the tomato meter says about the movie.
Oh yeah, it's in the IMDb top 250. I think it's like 106, 107 right now. So it's pretty high up there.
98% from critics. That's like as far as critics are concerned, that's like a near perfect film.
Yep.
Which is I find baffling because again I don't think this is better than the other Toy Story films. But if you go off of this metric, it is.
Yeah.
But again, maybe I'm still in the minority because the audience score is 95%. So it's not far off. So clearly people are just loving this movie.
Yeah.
And I'm on the outskirts.
Okay.
But, the box office, it was predicted that I was going to make like $140 million its opening weekend.
Yeah.
And in the end, it ended up making like 120.
Yeah.
So it fell below expectations. And, of course, it kind of continues the trend this summer has had of just movies making less money than they were expected, and just so we've kind of had this conversation before on the show when we were talking about that one movie with the bird in it that I can't remember for some reason.
The bird, yeah.
And X-Men, Men in Black.
I think you remembered it.
Uh-oh.
Oh no.
With Men in Black, these franchise films doing worse than their predecessors and doing worse than expected of them.
Right.
obviously $120 million opening weekend still puts us one of the biggest openings of the year.
Yeah.
So it's more than the third one made.
That's right.
So it's certainly nothing to sneeze at.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think there's actually like declining interest in Toy Story?
Well, let me preface this by saying I follow the box office reports that Dan Murrell of Screen Junkies /Fandom does every week, and he talked about this in great length about, is Toy Story 4 a disappointment? And to give you the Cliff Notes version, basically what he was explaining is that a lot of people with their tracking, that sometimes people get this idea that tracking is meant to predict how much money a movie is going to make on its opening weekend. But at the end of the day, what Dan Murrell was explaining is that tracking actually is not meant to be the signifier of, if someone says it should be making $150 million, then it should be, because if it doesn't, then it's a disappointment. Because there were some articles that were saying that Toy Story 4 should be opening between 100 to 150 million. One article said 150 to 200 million, which, like, if it went as high as 200 million, that would be one of the highest opening weekends of all time, beating out Incredibles 2, which has the highest opening weekend for an animated movie. So it was an interesting video, which I'd highly recommend. If you go onto the Fandom Entertainment channel, you can find where he talks about Toy Story 4. But what I'm getting at, though, is that I think it was still a good opening weekend. It did improve a little bit, even though, keep in mind, Toy Story 3 came out 9 years ago, so the amount that you'd pay for Toy Story 3, of course, has inflated a little bit in 2019 dollars. But is it possible that maybe it could have made more money, but it made a little less because of this franchise fatigue? I suppose it's always possible, because remember, this is a summer where we sort of started off with Avengers Endgame in April. Aladdin seemed to make more money than a lot of people were expecting. You still have The Lion King coming out in July. You still have Hobbs and Shaw coming out in August. And
Spider-Man goes to Europe.
Yeah, Spider-Man goes to Europe. Like, there's still some other big movies coming out. So it could be that, but I wouldn't expect that that's the big reason why it only opened up to 120 million, because that's still quite impressive. But yeah, it is possible there might be some people that just didn't go out on the opening weekend because, it's getting expensive to go to the theater, and it's the summertime season, so there are lots of other movies to see too. So it might just be a competitive battlefield.
So, in other words, you're not sure and that's fair. Like, I don't expect you to know
Yeah, just some guesses, really.
I don't think you'd understand completely the psyche of all moviegoers.
Exactly.
And how they feel about the Toy Story franchise.
Yeah.
So I was trying my best to, even though I was like, why are you even doing this, you money grubbers?
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to, and I saw that the reviews were good. I'm like, okay, that's no surprise. Like, they're pretty, like I said, I feel like the critics are kind of blind to whenever it's Pixar or Marvel, and they're like, oh, I must love it. Ah!
Yeah.
I must rate it well.
Or anything by Christopher Nolan.
Oh, yeah.
He's been very critic-friendly, basically since Memento.
Yeah, so having said that, like, getting into the actual movie now.
Yeah.
If you had to put the DVD box cover description of the plot without any real spoilers, what would you say?
Okay, here's the plan. Gabby has Forky. We know the perfect toy to help.
No.
Duke.
Nope.
Duke.
Nuh-uh.
Duke.
No way.
Duke.
Decline.
Duke.
My kid really needs this toy. You got a kid? Like a kid? Like a human kid? Yeah. We're gonna get a kid. We get a kid. Rated G.
Some time has passed since Bonnie has taken the toys from Andy at the end of Toy Story 3. Slight spoiler warning, but it's been out for 9 years. You've probably seen Toy Story 3, I would hope, to the people that are listening. And Bonnie literally makes a new friend on her first day of kindergarten, and this new friend she makes is Forky, the little spork figurine that you've seen in the trailers. Forky, of course, is just, he's kind of like a baby, right? He doesn't understand what it means to be a toy. There's lots of confusion going on, so Woody has to try and help him figure out his place in Bonnie's room, and what he's supposed to do as a toy. But then, of course, things get complicated because they all go on this trip, on this family trip with Bonnie and her parents. And basically, one thing leads to the next, and you get into another adventure where you meet some new toys. And Woody also comes across Bo Peep, a toy that he hasn't seen in years. So we get to see these new toys, we get to see these old toys, and we see how things evolve in this next chapter.
Very good. They should just, Pixar, hire Ben the Movie Buff, write your plot summaries for your Blu-ray covers, I guess. I've actually noticed that now. Like, it's just Blu-ray and digital now. Like, they're not even like selling Blu-ray DVD combos anymore because they're really phasing out DVD in a lot of cases.
I think there are some, but yeah, I think it's getting less and less common because really, at the end of the day, either if you are buying physical, chances are it's because you have a Blu-ray player, or you're just doing it digitally. So yeah, I didn't think DVDs would last this long, but I'd say maybe give it a few more years and they might finally.
They're even at the point now where they like have a release date for the digital version of the movie, like 2 weeks before the home video release. Sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's like they're really pushing for you to not. I'm like, and I know you do too.
Absolutely
having an actual collection of the movies you own. Anyway, maybe those are my toys.
That's right. Yeah,
my DVDs. And
those
Blu-rays.
are my new toys and a big collection. I have. I agree.
And like the Bat Jar, maybe does he count as a toy?
Yeah. Debatable, but sure, why not? If you play with him like a toy, then sure, he can be a toy.
Well, that actually is a great way to kind of start talking about the movie because Forky, we knew he was going to be coming because he was heavily promoted in all the trailers and whatnot.
Yeah.
And admittedly, the idea of Forky got me really excited about seeing another Toy Story because I thought they were going to really dive into the philosophy of, well, how does one become a toy and like at what point he feels like he isn't a toy because he's quite literally a spork with pipe cleaner arms and popsicle stick legs and googly eyes. He's like, I'm not a toy. Like I wasn't meant for this. Like I was designed for one purpose only. And so I thought the movie would really explore, and it does a bit, but I guess I wasn't satisfied, with how they did Forky's story. I guess because I had such a reputation in my mind that had been built up by the first 3 films. I guess I was expecting more from Toy Story 4.
Yeah, and I can't say too much now because it's kind of spoilery, which we'll save for a little later, assuming that we're talking spoilers soon. I thought about that too as well, but I think there is a decent reason for why we don't get in as much detail as we do. I think that has part of the fact to do with, Woody's motivation, right? Which, of course, I can't say much beyond that, but I did wonder about that as well because, they feature him heavily in the promotional materials. And, as I finished the movie, I did think about that. I'm like, Forky's there a fair amount of the time, but, it definitely kind of gets you wondering. I'm like, I would have been interested to learn a bit more, but I think there is a reason for it, which I'll get into a little later.
Well, all I have to say, I did enjoy the movie. Like, I found myself laughing a lot. Like, some of the scenes had me, busting a gut laughing.
It's very funny. Their jokes are so darn clever. I'm so jealous of them and all the great ideas they come up with.
And frankly, the animation is stellar.
Yes.
There's a lot of scenes with human characters in this because Pixar has really perfected... I don't know if perfect is the right word, but they've really... Let's put it this way. When they made the first Toy Story, they shied away from showing a human whenever possible.
Yes, understandably so.
And in this one, it's like they go out of their way to show humans doing stuff.
Yes.
Like there's entire scenes with humans interacting with each other.
Yeah.
And you not even just the humans, but there's a cat in this movie.
Yeah.
You'd swear it was a live action cat.
Yeah.
And there's even parts with the toys, even the fabrics and the vinyl and the plastic. I don't know. You really felt like these were actual toys, if that makes sense.
And then another thing too, of course, that I knew was definitely something to showcase how far the animation has come is the upper area of the antique shop and how you see all the wood that looks kind of old and then all the cobwebs and spider webs and all that, and there's a lot, and you can tell that they really wanted to show how impressive it looks after all this time, and it does because they've come a long way since Toy Story.
Yeah, so I think I think a lot of the problems I have with the movie might fall into the realm of nitpicking, and I feel like someone like you, it sounds like you enjoyed it more than I did. So
yeah, I think so.
You might be able to bring me down, back to reality, to help me see that I'm being too nitpicky. But one thing I observed with Toy Story 4 is that they introduce, like every Toy Story film does, introduce new toys, new characters, which would make sense. If they just kept using the same characters, it would get stale eventually.
Yeah.
But it's getting to the point now where this is now Toy Story 4.
Yeah.
And there are so many characters that a lot of them really are underserviced by the story.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Most of the original Toy Story toys are... okay, Mr. Potato Head, Don Rickles died some time ago.
Yeah.
And he's able to reprise his role in this movie because they just had archival footage of him to use.
Yeah.
Because he basically just has a couple like one-off lines here or there.
Exactly,
They're
yeah.
able to use a dead actor in this movie because his character has so little to do in the movie.
Yeah.
You know, and I say that just not because I have such great attachments. Like, I want to see Mr. Potato Head front and
Yeah.
center in the movie. It's like, well, no,
Yeah.
he's always been a side character. But I use that point with Don Rickles to illustrate the fact that there's very little of a lot of the original characters because it makes sense. Like, you can only have so many characters take up screen time.
Yeah.
And with the new characters, you're trying to establish their backstories and their motivations and their gimmicks.
Mm-hmm.
And so naturally, yeah, if you're going to devote screen time towards the new characters, it obviously means that like you're going to lose out on screen time for the older characters.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing, really. It seems to me like one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't scenarios where if you were to not introduce very many new characters and you stick with the old ones, then yeah, like you say, it just like we've kind of seen these characters before. And even someone like Mr. Potato Head, even though he doesn't have that much to do in this movie, we've seen him in a total of 4 movies now. And I think arguably he has the most to do in the first and second movies. Even in the third movie, he still has a fair amount. But I think it's because... you want to give new attention to Forky and to Gabby Gabby and to Ducky and Bunny and Duke Kaboom. My man Keanu still killing it as always. So I think it's difficult that you either you don't introduce newer characters or you introduce 1 or 2 and give them the very basic stuff to do and you give more to the older characters, or you make the movie like 20 minutes longer to give all the other old characters more stuff to do. So I definitely felt that, but I think I forgave it a bit because even though, like, oh yeah, maybe Jessie didn't have as much to do in this movie. Well, she had a lot to do in the second movie, and she had a fair amount to do in the third movie. It even reminds me of when I saw Return of the King, and keep in mind, like, Lord of the Rings: Return of the King is my favorite movie of all time. But one of my first reactions when the movie was done, despite how blown away by it that I remember thinking, I was like, they don't do that much with Legolas and Gimli. I was like, they do so much in the first and second movies, but in the third movie, like, it's just, so much is happening now, and they place a lot of focus on the battle scenes and other characters and this and that by the end, I felt like, yeah, Legolas and Gimli don't have that much to do until, like, the final 2 battles. So I think at the end of the day, it's difficult because you either make the movie longer or you take away some of the material from the newer characters to give more to do for the older characters. So it's kind of rough, but yeah, I'd call that as a nitpick too. But there's still so much that I loved about the movie that I was willing to forgive it.
Yeah, I think the characters that suffer the most are the ones that were introduced in Toy Story 3.
Yeah.
Because unlike Mr. Potato Head or Jessie, who have had like more focus in the first 2 films,
yep,
those characters were introduced in the third film with not much fanfare because big movie, lots of characters.
Yeah.
And now they're just here.
Right.
They're just there. They have things to say.
Yeah.
And, it's like the MCU and some of these other big franchises, like Lord of the Rings is a good example of this. It
Yep.
shows you how to balance a large cast.
Yeah.
And I would have argued basically, like, if you couldn't find a way to, like, have these characters do something significant in the movie, just don't have them there at all. Like, have them be left behind.
Maybe,
on the road trip or something like that.
Yeah.
That's a nitpick. But where it really comes out for me is that Buzz Lightyear is criminally underused in this movie. And what he does do is spoilery, but I'll say I don't like what they do with him in the movie. Because Woody is basically the star of this movie. Like, he is... And I've always felt like this franchise has been a balance between Woody and Buzz.
Right.
Like, obviously, the first Toy Story is mostly told from Woody's vantage point.
Yeah.
And then the plot of the second film is based around Woody's kind of backstory.
Yep.
And then the third film, again, Woody's maybe a little more central than Buzz, but this is the first time watching a Toy Story movie where I felt like that balance was way off.
All right.
If you're to present these 2 as the lead characters of the series, I felt like the balance was way off. But I'm curious to hear you have to say about that.
Yeah, so once again, that's fair. I get that. I wonder if the reason they do that is because, so if we're to take a nod from television, sometimes when, and I got to be careful how I word this without giving anything away quite yet, but like you said, Toy Story 4 is like another case where, like, this is Woody's movie. Like, this is like a lot of the movie. There's so much to do with him. He is such an important part of it. On top of just being a main character, like, he is so valuable, and there's so much that happens here for him that. I don't think I can say it without spoilers, but I think there is a reason for the fact that we don't see as much of Buzz Lightyear, and I think it's because there's a lot of stuff that happens at the antique shop, where of course, like, you know, Woody plays a big part in there, and then of course there's, you know, stuff that happens kind of in other locations that once again happens with Woody. I think it's just because of the way that the story's constructed that, and to be fair, I mean, given all of the characters that we've seen before, Buzz is actually one of the toys that like gets way more screen time than all the other toys, which to be fair he should, because yeah, like you say, it's been all about Woody and Buzz for the last 3 movies. But I think it's just one of those things where if you were to try and get Buzz involved more, that means you're either A, changing the story, which I can see them kind of liking the story as it is, because I really liked it as it was, or it means you're adding 10 to 15 minutes running time to give Buzz more to do. But I feel like we've already gotten to know so much about Buzz in the first 3 Toy Story movies that in the 4th, once again, I was more forgiving of, like, I still saw Buzz a fair amount, and I was okay with that.
Well, I'm glad you were fine with it.
I was.
I could use the same arguments. Like we've learned, we've spent enough time with Woody.
Right. Yeah. But once again, like my rebuttal to that will be in the spoiler discussion, because I can't say it now. But I think I have to. All
right, fine.
Talk more about it then.
New characters are funny. Like each of the new characters they introduce. Like there's one that's like meant to be like a stand-in for like a Polly Pocket kind of toy.
That's right. Yeah, Giggle McDimples, I think is the
name. Key and Peele. Like they're basically Key and Peele. Like they're just doing their shtick together, and it works, and it's funny. And it's Keanu Reeves is this Canadian toy Duke Kaboom. It's
so beautiful.
Yes, we Canada.
Yeah, oh man, like that's gonna become a thing. Unless it has already been a thing, and that's where they got it from. That's gonna be a thing. Especially, I mean, we're both Canadian, right? So I think we're gonna hear that a lot from now on, thanks to Toy Story 4.
I wonder though. Toy Story 2 started this trend of introducing us to toys with kind of tragic backstories, and like and Toy Story 3 and now Toy Story 4 have continued this tradition.
Yeah. And
it's kind of like, how many different ways are there for a toy to be sad? Like at the end of the day, all it's doing is making me feel bad.
Right.
It's like, oh, like I did not, you know, because in real life, toys are inanimate objects. Sorry, Batjar. But they're inanimate objects. They don't have feelings. So to be discarded or forgotten by a child, it's okay to do so. But if you follow the rules of the Toy Story universe, you know, it's like you're just basically, every time you introduce a new toy with this tragic backstory, how they were abandoned by a child, it just makes the audience feel like jerks.
I mean, I didn't feel that way, but I think the reason why they keep on coming to that is that A, it's a good source of conflict. I think as Jesse's backstory, I think kind of set the template for, you know, like why you get some good emotional weight from that. But I think it's also like when you think about Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you see how they have these things that they like returning to time and time again, right? It's like name one Marvel Cinematic Universe movie that doesn't rely on humor. And yes, there might be like one or two, like Incredible Hulk, for example. I can't recall if there was that much humor in that movie. But I think once like Thor and the Avengers came along, every Marvel movie after that was trying to be funny. Every Star Wars movie has at least like one lightsaber battle, has one space battle, like a cameo appearance by C-3PO and R2-D2. Right? Like there are certain things that they kind of come back to. And I think, yes, like how many times can you do this toy being discarded or toy having a tragic backstory? Clearly you can do it a handful of times. And if they want to, they'll do it again. But I think it's because it's one of those things that clearly is effective in trying to weave their way into the already complex stories that I feel like each Toy Story movie has had. So yeah, I think it's just something that they're like, oh, how do we get some conflict, or how do we give a backstory to this person? Oh, they're discarded by a kid, or a kid doesn't love them unless they have a voice box or something like that, right? So I think it's just something that's comfortable for them to return to.
And granted, it doesn't feel like they're doing the exact same thing. Like the circumstances are different. It's just it's similar enough that you're like kind of like, oh yeah, this is they've done this before.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Both Toy Story 2 and 3 featured a C-type villain, which if you go back to our episode on Disney villains, we talk about how there's 3 types of Disney villains.
Right.
The C-type is basically the surprise villain.
Yes.
Toy Story 4, the villain is kind of like presented as a villain pretty much in the offset.
Yeah.
Which I'm kind of thankful for, because I'm kind of getting burned out on these surprise villains.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, do something different, please.
But it's like I can't. Okay, I don't want to say anything about.
I know what you mean though. Yeah, that's right.
I don't want to say anything else about the villain without going to spoilers.
Yes.
I enjoyed her. That's the short version of it.
Me too, for sure.
The music was very Toy Story-ish. Like they definitely play a lot, and it's like makes you feel very familiar. There's like a new Randy Newman song. I was like, oh no, Randy, stop.
Yeah,
stop, please.
Oh,
you got
man.
the one. I'll enjoy your one song, but please stop.
That's right. He's already won an Oscar, so it's like you're good, Randy. You're good. But yes, no, that's right. And there are a few musical nods to previous Toy Story movies. Like there's a heroic moment with Buzz Lightyear, which
you remember something Buzz did?
Hey, I remember lots of things that Buzz did. No, listen here. The musical nod, like there's a heroic moment where he's running through the carnival, and that music is the same music that you hear from the beginning of Toy Story 2 when Buzz is flying to the planet, and you hear that heroic music. So there are all sorts of Easter eggs that I was like, oh, cool, they're doing this again. And I gotta say, they do a musical nod to a Stanley Kubrick movie. When Woody and Forky get to the antique shop, which I thought was awesome. But people who are fairly well versed in Stanley Kubrick movies, you'll know what I mean. But yeah, and like when we get to the spoiler section, I'll say it. But I just thought it was great. I knew exactly what they were doing at first, and I'm like, oh, this is so good.
Well, let's pretty much just go there now.
Okay.
I would say if you're gonna skip ahead to we'll summarize the movie then. But
yeah,
if you haven't seen Toy Story 4 yet and you don't want to get spoiled, and you just don't want to, read the time code to find out where you skip ahead, and you're just like, I'll just stop listening now.
Yeah.
Well, we thank you for spending time with us, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
But I would say Toy Story 4 is worth seeing.
Absolutely.
At the very least, just so that you can have a conversation with somebody about it.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like we're going to get into it here.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to go into the spoiler verse now, where it's okay to talk about spoilers for everything, but we're only going to spoil Toy Story 4. So we'll count it down 3, 2, 1. All right, what's the movie that they reference?
What's The Shining?
Really?
So yeah. So at the end of The Shining, in like the last few shots where you get to that last moving shot of like Jack Nicholson in the old party photo, you hear this like na 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 na, and like it sounds a bit eerie, and they play that the moment when the ventriloquist dummy picks up Woody and Forky and puts them in like the carriage, and they start getting the tour of the antique shop, and that music starts playing, which I thought was so funny because it sets the tone of like, welcome to the second chance antique shop, but it's like nothing good is going to come from this experience. It's just to set up the imminent threat.
So do we want to talk about how Woody basically just gave his liver to save a kidnapping victim?
That's right. Yep. Basically along those lines.
What kind of message is that sending? Oh, sure. Go along with whatever the kidnappers want.
Yeah. So here, let me get spoiler about that point, because I only have two nitpicks with the movie. One, and this is not like a complete fair one, because I feel like the movie was still great without it, but each Toy Story movie, each finale has a really cool action scene, right? I love the end. First Toy Story movie, the end of the second one is pretty good too. I love the like how dark and grimy the third one gets, and like how intense it is. But then I know, isn't it just, you think back and you just get like PTSD and you're like, oh my god, deep breaths. But Toy Story 4 really only has, to me, like, it had kind of that one action scene in the middle where they're trying to save Forky, and Woody kind of has like the string around him, and like they grab onto his pull string, and he's kind of like caught between both, and Duke Kaboom's trying to help out. That was really cool. I like that a lot. But besides that, I was actually kind of surprised that at the end that they didn't like finish off with a big action scene. And I think
that RV was driving around pretty fast.
Yeah, that's right. Like that was your quote unquote action scene. So I found that kind of weird. But once again, I think that has more to do with my expectation of what I see in other Toy Story movies, and I'm like, oh, it wasn't like the other Toy Story movies. But that meant that it kind of tried something new and tried to be a bit different. So I respect, even though, like, for me, I'm like, I still would have liked to see a bit more action.
It's kind of like Civil War in that sense, where the big action scene's in the middle of the movie, and then the conflict that ends between a smaller group of characters.
True. That's a great analogy, actually. So that's my one nitpick, but still a nitpick. My other nitpick, from a story perspective, so I think people going into Toy Story 4 know that Woody's voice box is a part of the toy, right? Somebody poisoned the water hole, right? You're my best friend, like, and all those sayings. So it makes sense why he would be scared to not want to give it up to Gabby, who wants it back so she can have the voice box, so that she can be hopefully picked by that kid that keeps on coming into the antique shop. But from a story perspective, I feel like we needed a bit more emphasis for like maybe Woody. Maybe like that's part of his identity, and maybe like he could have had a few lines where he said like, no, not my voice box. I mean, correct me if I'm missing something or forgot something here, but I felt like it wasn't much of that. And then once he does give his voice box, it's almost one of those things where he gives his voice box away, but then afterwards it's like he's okay. He's not like, oh, shoot, my voice box. Now, now Bonnie's not going to love me anymore. Now what am I going to do? I'm such a different toy. He seems to kind of get over it kind of quickly. And it seems to me that when characters have something that they don't want to give away, like normally it's because at some point in the story they are going to have to give it away. It just seemed to me that like, well, they stitched up Woody. And I guess he's fine, and he just kind of keeps on going. I guess I would have liked just a little bit more of hammering why he doesn't want to give the voice box up. Which, I mean, like, yes, we can kind of put two and two together, but I'd like to see, like, how Woody would verbalize it. And then also, like, what's the consequences that he has to live with now that he doesn't have his voice box? And I feel like, yeah, that was just something they kind of really skimmed over. And it's like, well, he gave his voice box, he's fine. Let's just move on. So it's like, okay.
Now, I'm sure part of the reason why they give Woody so much screen time is because he's played by Tom Hanks, who's obviously like the biggest name attached to these. And even in the 90s, it was kind of weird. So here's Tom Hanks paired up with Tim Allen, who at that point it was really only doing sitcoms on TV.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like the star power is like way off between those two guys.
Yeah.
But they made it work. They had a good dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Woody has like 2 or 3 good like he has 3 storylines in this movie.
Yeah.
Whereas Buzz, the one thing he has like, inner voice, and he just keeps listening to what his pre-recorded things are saying.
Yeah.
I was like, how's this? Again, maybe I'm a bias as a Buzz Lightyear fan.
Right.
But I'm this character should be smarter than this at this point. He's been around for at least 20 years as a, like, he shouldn't be like, oh, let's just do whatever the button says.
Yeah.
And then this whole idea, like, he doesn't know what his conscience is like, is this like a Buzz, like, if this was like Toy Story 1 Buzz Lightyear and that's in Toy Story 4, I'd buy it. But at this point, it's like, no, like, he's supposed to be smarter than this. And the fact that that's his kind of like main, it was funny once or twice, but then they keep coming back to it, and that's like his main thing in the movie.
Yeah, no, okay, that's fair. I thought the joke itself, the whole, him pressing the button and hear like the different, or even like, I think there's a scene towards the end where like he wants to go after Woody, but he's kind of torn. So he's like, what should I do? He presses his button, and then it's like, go away for now. And then he presses again. It's like retreat, and then he presses it again. And he's like, it's too dangerous. We must move, right? And every time he presses the button, it's a different variation on like you have to go. So yeah, that's a fair point. That maybe that would be something more. We would feel more at home during like a Toy Story 1 Buzz Lightyear as opposed to Toy Story 4. I still thought it was a funny ongoing joke, but I guess like I said earlier, I think, and who knows, maybe with some brainstorming, one could find a more interesting thing to do with Buzz Lightyear, because really what he does in Toy Story 4 is kind of similar in a way to what he does in Toy Story 2, where Woody's somewhere else. We have to go get him before time runs out. So Buzz kind of leads the charge. So in a way, it was kind of repetitious that he does that. He does that again.
But even with that, it's like when like in the past movies, like when he's asked to be the leader, he leads. Like
yeah.
In this one, it's like they present him as like he doesn't know what to do. It's like, did you like lose some brain cells in the time that you've been with Bonnie or something?
Yeah. Apparently.
And it's frustrating. And again, I guess I'm frustrated, not just as a Buzz Lightyear fan, but I see that basically every moment that could have developed to his character, or even giving him more screen time, went into telling this really complex story with Woody.
Yeah. So, and what I was going to say earlier about that was, it seems to me, to take a nod from TV shows, it seems to be either when a character leaves or when a character's about to die. Like, you ever notice that when you watch a TV show and you have like a minor character? And I mean, to be fair, it's different because Woody is not a minor character. He's like the main character, if not a major character. You watch a show with like a character you see here and there, and then all of a sudden you have this episode where like they're the main character, and you're like, well, that's weird. Why are they all of a sudden the main character? And then 2 minutes before the episode ends, they either get shot or stabbed or they die, and it's like it's a send-off episode, right? They're at the spot. They're in the spotlight because it's their last. It's their last episode. So while it might not completely justify why why Buzz wasn't as well utilized as he could have been, I think it's because when you get to that fact where Woody decides, you know what, I'm not going to go back with Bonnie. Andy was my kid. I served Andy well. Now it's time to move on. Now it's time to be reunited with Bo Peep. That I think that's why we had so much emphasis on Woody. I think that's also the reason why, like you said, like, oh, we might get into some interesting details about, like, like how did Forky become a toy, and like, like how do you train him to this and that? Because, like, to be fair, yeah, they don't go into that much detail. They go into some, but I think the reason why they did that was one of the big reasons why Forky became a toy was because Woody stowed away in Bonnie's backpack and kind of helped her, kind of acted like as a guardian angel for that one scene to give her all the supplies that she put together to make Forky. Which, for the record, that scene of creating Forky, maybe it was just the music and the fact that Woody was trying to be helpful and throwing all the things together and whatnot, I thought was such a beautiful scene that I was like, this is impacting me more than I feel a scene like this should, but I thought it was astounding. And really, I think the reason why we don't spend as much time as we do with Forky is because a lot of this is, once again, through Woody's vantage point, right? With Woody creating Forky, that gives him something to do. And they make a good point of that in like the second half, where Woody wants to go back and get Forky, and Bo Peep kind of calls him out on it and says, like, you only want to go back and get Forky because, like, that gives you something to do. If you don't have Forky, Bonnie doesn't care for you. But by taking care of Forky, Bonnie likes Forky. That's Woody's kind of in line. That's his way to be a relevant toy again, given that at the beginning, Bonnie has just kind of forgotten him. But I think that's why we don't get as much time with Forky, is because all of these different things that kind of happen, it's more or less like, how does it affect Woody? So yeah, I think that's why we don't spend as much time with Forky or as much time learning about those answer to those questions, which I'd be curious about too. But I think it's because Forky gives Woody a reason to be relevant, if you will, to be able to help out Bonnie.
And I might sound like I'm complaining that Woody got so much screen time. Like, I thought a lot of things they did were interesting, like the fact that he is left in the closet and he's not Bonnie's favorite toy. It makes sense. Like, why would a little girl be super interested in a cowboy? Yeah. Or really any of the toys that Andy gave her, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I think to assume that, like, 21st century kids want to play with, like, cowboys or like that kind of stuff.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
And, especially if you like think about the lore of the Toy Story universe, wherein, the Woody toy's been around since the 1950s.
That's right, yeah.
I don't know any kids today who play with toys that were originally like made for that time period.
Right.
And I think that kind of spills over for Gabby as well, to like for her to put all her hope on the fact that if she has a voice box, this girl will like her.
Yeah.
I thought it was so sad, but it was also like so realistic. It's like, yeah, of course, like
exactly.
A modern kid's gonna find novelty in this for a second and be like, whatever.
Yeah, and isn't it tragic that people were kind of noting this on the Reddit forum about the movie, is that at the end of Toy Story 3, Woody was supposed to go to college with Andy, right? Andy was going to take one toy and he was going to take Woody, but Woody put himself in the box with all the other toys that were supposed to go to Bonnie, and Andy kind of entrusted Bonnie with Woody, right? But then maybe a few months or so passes, and Woody's kind of been forgotten by Bonnie, which is sad. And of course you're like, oh, why would they do that? But once again, like it's realistic that a little girl would do that. But it kind of works too, because that's like the start of Woody's emotional journey to get to the point where he is at the end of Toy Story 4, when he decides, you know what, I'm going to be a quote unquote lost toy. I'm not going to have an owner, and I'm going to stick with my new gang of friends.
I thought it was kind of sad that he basically couldn't move on from Andy. Like all the other toys seem to, for the amount of screen time they have, it seems as though they're able to like kind of move on and accept their life with Bonnie. But he's at one point he like says Andy's name when he means to say Bonnie, because in his mind he's still Andy's toy, and he can't. And to be honest, it was like, Woody, you're kind of pathetic. Like you I know you've been a little neurotic and a little like concerned for yourself in some of these other movies, but it's really like not looking good on you here.
Exactly, and I think that works as a great flaw in his part, right? Because really, here's another Toy Story movie that kind of asks that big question, like, what do you do when your one purpose in life, when the one thing that you live for just seems to be a bit non-existent, right? It's like, how do you find meaning in your life? And it's interesting that he gets to see Bo Peep all these years again, to then realize, if you've served your one purpose and you feel like there's not much to what you're currently doing, maybe you have to find a new purpose, which is a big, scary thing to do. It's a lot of change for sure. But once again, it asks some big questions. And halfway through, when Bo Peep was explaining to Woody that, like, oh, you know what, there actually are some benefits to just kind of being a lost toy and traveling around and whatnot, it was then that I realized, I was like, oh, shoot, I think I know what's going to happen. Woody's not going to go back with the toys. I was like, no, Woody, you can't. But then by the end, like, it made sense that he would want to do that. And it was sad, it was bittersweet, but it made sense for his character.
Well, you know what? There's a YouTuber named Captain Midnight that would disagree with you, because right before we recorded, I watched this video with his like commentary on Toy Story 4.
Yeah.
And he plays a clip from Toy Story 2 where Buzz Lightyear says, you know, I came to like save this toy because he taught me that the only real way a toy can exist is to be loved by a child. Mm-hmm. And it's like that's the conviction Woody has throughout the first 3 films. Yeah. And like you said, he makes the decision to, like, instead of going with Andy, go in the box and be with the other toys. Yeah. Because he knows that the purpose of a toy is to be loved by a child. Yeah. So I don't feel as strongly about this as Captain Midnight does. Right. But he feels like the decision that Woody makes to become a lost toy goes against his character.
I would argue against that and say that sometimes, especially in movie series and in series in general, you have a character that feels strongly about something. And I mean, in this case, it's like in Toy Story 2, where it's like, the only reason for you to be here is to be loved by a child. And I don't think it's I don't think it's the case that at the end of the movie, Woody completely disregards that. I think he just realized that he served his purpose, right? All of the toys that are with Bonnie will stay with Bonnie, and Bonnie will continue to love toys and this and that until she grows out of it. But I think Woody, because remember, it's not so much that, oh, Bonnie was looking for Woody, and Woody's like, yeah, you know what, like, sorry, Bonnie, I'm going to be a lost toy. I think it's because he just realized that the way he used to be with Andy is the complete opposite with Bonnie. Bonnie doesn't care for him anymore. And really, at the end of the movie, when Woody decides to become a lost toy, do we see any scene of Bonnie being like, where's the cowboy? Nope, because she doesn't care about him anymore. So it seems to me that, does it go against his character? Maybe, but I think that's just him realizing later in life that maybe you can do things a bit differently and like still have that idea, because like technically he was probably with Andy for many years until Andy got too old and had to and put him away in storage. But I think if anything that's because it's realistic with some people, having like me in my 20s, like I believe firmly in this thing, and then me in my 60s, maybe I might not believe in that thing anymore. Maybe I might change. And I think if anything, it's a bit of an arc for Woody to strongly believe in something, and not to say that he completely disbelieves in it, but maybe he's just found it's time to move on and do something new.
Okay, you know what? I wish Captain Midnight was here to hear that.
Yeah, Captain Midnight. But I mean, it's a fair point. Like I get it. I understand it. But I think the movie did a good job of explaining why he makes his choice.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about the whole Gabby thing, because it's like,
okay, I
liked when she was introduced as a villain, and she she has this like kind of sympathetic motivation that she wants to like be it's kind of like Prospector Pete. She missed out on the opportunity of being a child's toy, right? And so she is very focused on her goal of securing the thing that will make her, what she perceives will make her whole. Yeah. And it's like, even when she gets that, she's not satisfied. And so then at that point she stops being the villain, and then she just becomes another character for them to befriend. Yeah. And so like the conflict of the film becomes, will Woody and Forky get back on the bus? Yeah. And it's like I appreciate with Prospector Pete and Hug-a-Lot or Lotso.
Lotso, Hug and Bear.
Yeah, that they maintain their arc as a villain. Right. Like, I guess maybe this is just opening the door for more redemptive characters, and maybe that's not a bad thing. Yeah. But for me, it's like once her conflict was resolved, then it's like, okay, like why is this movie still going on? And I guess to like serve as Woody's story at the end there.
Exactly, yeah. It's interesting. It's kind of twofold, where like on the one hand, I was expecting, when they go with Gabby and they're, about to find the child that Gabby ends up going to, you're just thinking the whole time, you're like, something has to happen that's going to bring her back to her villain status. Something has to happen where she's going to be like, right, no, sorry, I'm not on your side. I'm going to do whatever I want. Because, sometimes we get that. Sometimes we get villains that have like a moment of redemption, and you're like, maybe things will be okay, and then they go back to being a villain. We've seen that before, no doubt. But so yes, like it felt a little like anticlimactic that it's like, okay, I guess, that's not going to happen. But on the other hand, it was kind of refreshing, because it's so much the fact that, that she didn't become like a complete Lotso, Hug and Bear or Stinky Pete, because doing that would be repetitious of the second and third Toy Story movies. So if anything, like, they kind of chose to do something different, and even though it might not have been as exciting, I still respect that they tried to be a bit different, because some people would argue that, like, while Toy Story 3 is good and all, that they're like, it repeats a lot of the things from Toy Story 2. And that's fair. I still love Toy Story 3. I still think there's a lot of great stuff, despite the fact that it might repeat some story elements from the second movie. But it seemed to me that Toy Story 4 had things like, oh, is Gabby going to do something that brings her back to villain status? No, actually, she's not. She's actually going to be with a child and everything's going to be okay. Is Woody going to once again say no to a group of toys that bring him away from his owner? Actually, no, this time he's going to say yes, and he is going to go away from his owner. So,
I guess if I'm going to put my writer's hat on, I'm going to compare this to the My Little Pony movie that came out 2 years ago now.
All right.
In that movie, there's the main character who's the villain, and she's supposed to be a unicorn, but her horn's broken.
Okay.
So she feels disfigured. She feels like she's incomplete.
Yeah.
Her magic doesn't work properly. And it's like her main motivation that, if she fulfills the needs of the villain, the bigger villain of the story, that she'll get her horn repaired.
Okay.
And so her whole journey is very similar to Gabby's in the sense that they're both looking to become whole again.
Yeah.
They perceive themselves that they're damaged or they're broken because there's an imperfection about them.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the My Little Pony movie, the villain, who's played by Emily Blunt, actually.
Cool. Okay, right on.
I can't remember her name, but I do know it's Emily Blunt.
Oh, that's great.
She comes to accept the fact that she's perfect the way she is. That, like, even with the broken horn, like, that's who she is.
Yeah.
And she doesn't feel like she has to have a full horn to become full.
Right.
To be her whole self. Mm-hmm. And I thought what they did with Gabby was interesting in the sense like they give her what she thinks she wants, and then it turns out it still doesn't get her any closer to what she wants.
Right.
I think it still sends the wrong message to say like, oh, like you still have to try and get the performance, like enhance yourself somehow.
Right.
And to be honest, like, yeah, it was cute when she goes with that girl, but like, how long is that girl gonna want to hold on to a Gabby doll? Again, it's the same problem with Woody. It's like a doll from like the 50s.
Right. Who knows?
But it doesn't sound like I'm wearing you down at all. Like you're putting up a good fight, like defending this movie.
Oh, I like it's funny. Earlier when you mentioned, you're like, oh, like the fourth movie that's not as good as the others. I would agree to a certain extent with that because I think so. If I had to rank them, I would rank Toy Story 2 is my favorite, without a doubt. Then it's Toy Story. Then it's Toy Story 3, and then I put down Toy Story 4. But Toy Story 4, I think what I was, like I said, my concern was I was going to walk out of the movie saying like, yeah, I liked it. That's about it. But I wanted to really like it. I wanted to say this is a really good movie, and I thought it was a really good movie. And you bring up some interesting points for sure. And yeah, I think they could have probably utilized Buzz Lightyear a little better. But I think given the weight to like the story and the message, the entertaining factor, like all the humor, and like Duke Kaboom's a backstory like was so funny, and like he had all sorts of great lines like after their initial like attack, if you will, or the rescue operation to get Forky. Bo Peep is by her sheep, and then she's like, "It'll be okay, and then we pan over to Duke Kaboom with his motorcycle, and he's petting the motorcycle, saying, "It'll be okay." That was funny. Like there were so many funny moments, and I just got to hand it off to the writers again for giving us a story that was basically more or less in the same level of quality as the other movies in regards to the way that the story kind of weaves, character motivations and how does this one character get there and why does this character feel a certain way, and like certain ongoing jokes like the one unicorn that's like, yeah, we should send her dad to jail or something like that. And they're like, no, we're not doing that. He brings it up a second time, and then the third time the cops are following the RV that's kind of malfunctioning, and he's like, yeah, he's definitely going to jail. there were a lot of, I just loved how everything kind of came together so that it wasn't like your average animated movie that's like, it was cute, but that was about it. Like there was way more to it than that, and I really appreciated that, and I think that's what every Toy Story movie has done up until this point.
Those are all fair points. I think if I were to rank them, I'd be a little different than you. I'd put Toy Story 3 as the best.
Okay.
And I think that's just my own, like, how I reacted or how it impacted me when I saw it.
Yep.
Because I have not rewatched the movies recently. I don't even think I've seen any of them in years.
Yep.
But if I had to go off of how I feel about them, it's Toy Story 3, Toy Story 2, Toy Story, and then Toy Story 4.
Cool.
And I think it's also unfair, like Toy Story 4, like I said, it's a series that kind of just in a way it started out great and then just kind of gradually got better.
Yeah.
So like for Toy Story 4 to succeed, it not only had to follow up on an entry that was like a great conclusion.
Yeah.
But it also had to like continue this upwards trend. It's like, well, surely it's going to peak at some point.
Yeah.
So this leads me to asking you, do you want more Toy Story movies at this point?
That's a great question.
Because they kind of like set up a new franchise almost with like Woody and the Lost Toys.
Exactly. My question is, if they were to do another Toy Story movie, are we now would we now be doing a movie like it seems to me that Woody and the other toys, like, yeah, that would be like the next movie. Is it would have to either be Woody and his new toy friends, or it would have to be Bonnie. It's just weird. Like, you got to wonder, how could they work it to bring them all back together again? Or is the point now to keep them separate? And, like, would we see the other toys? Would we see Bonnie's toys again? Or would we just see Woody and his toys? Because really, on the one hand, it's like having a Toy Story movie without a lot of the iconic toys feels weird. But then if you have all of the other iconic toys and not Woody, that feels weird. So, on the one hand, yeah, I wouldn't mind another Toy Story movie if they could bring it to the level of quality that we've expected over these past few movies. However, it seems to me that except for the first two Toy Story movies, although no, I guess to be fair, I think that Toy Story 2 is actually the one that's kind of different, is that it seems to me that the first Toy Story movie, the third and the fourth, it seemed to me like they all took a long time to make. There was no case of like, all right, guys, we're going to have a new Toy Story movie out in 2 years, so let's get cracking and let's get this out as fast as we can. It seemed very important to take your time, get it right, work on it over and over and over again until you feel like you have a story worth telling that's not like a cute animated movie, but that's something that can live up to the other Toy Story movies. If they could do that for a fifth movie, hats off to them, but if they left it at Toy Story 4, it also feels like just another... another bittersweet ending that I feel like you could leave the franchise on. But I'd just be very curious, like, where do you go from here now that you have two groups of toys? Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like bringing them back together would be too much like Men in Black 2, where it just repeats. It's like it takes away all the narrative weight by just kind of bringing it back together.
That's fair. Yeah, exactly.
And I feel like a movie about like Buzz and Jessie in Bonnie's bedroom would rely too much on the tropes of the other movies.
That's right. Yeah. So I guess it would kind of have to be Woody and his new gang of friends, which like Bo Peep we've seen the first and second, but yeah, that would be a tough one trying to figure that out. So
and they kind of like through the post credits kind of things where they show them at the arcade making sure all those toys get given away. Like
yeah,
it kind of almost felt like a trailer for like, oh, can you imagine this as a movie or as like a
right.
Disney Plus show? And I was like, no,
yeah.
And again, maybe it's because I'm more biased towards Buzz, but I was like,
right.
This isn't. You aren't selling me on this, even if you got Key and Peele there.
Yeah.
I guess we should talk about Bo Peep because she is very prominent in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel she was because people are comparing her to Rey in the sense like you're putting this female character up and you're kind of prioritizing her role in the movie over like the male characters. Did you feel like it was a continuation of that, or did you feel like it was just fine to have her? Because even like the way they redesign her, like they intentionally like make her less of the more traditional Bo Peep with like the big pink dress. Yeah,
I would say I kind of felt that. It is interesting when you think about Bo Peep's involvement in the first and second Toy Story movies, because she's a supporting character and she likes Woody and she gets to crack a few jokes here and there and she has her sheep. But beyond that, she doesn't have, like, even in the second one, she doesn't go on the trip with Buzz and the toys to save Woody, so she doesn't really have that much to do. So I think it makes sense to kind of give her more to do in this movie, and I think it's fun to kind of give her that, kind of like Rey feel, where now she's like a warrior and a scavenger and this and that. So I think it was a fun direction to take the character. And something it reminds me of, though, was someone kind of brought this up with Mad Max Fury Road and how they said that Mad Max Fury Road seems to be more about Furiosa and less about Mad Max, which some people could complain about, but then you think about, well, in the first three Mad Max movies, he's the main character in all of them, right? So it's almost, it's that same idea again of it's okay if Mad Max takes a bit of a backseat in Fury Road because we've already seen him in three other movies, and we have this other character that gets the spotlight in the same way that Bo Peep was not in Toy Story 3, so it's kind of cool to get a lot of time with her to see how she's kind of evolved as a character, and especially to get some backstory in the first 10 minutes of the movie to see...
That opening was like the best part of the movie for me.
I really like the opening, and yeah, like and once again, like it did what an introduction is supposed to do, is it sets up the characters and also sets up this idea of, you know, Woody, you could come with me. Toys get lost all the time. What do you say? And Woody says no, like he normally does, which makes sense. But then they only do that because at the end, they're going to be in that same situation again, and this time Woody's not going to say no.
Yeah, like that opening really, and it kind of like reminded me of Up in the sense that, like, you know, you can just watch the first 10 minutes as if it's a short film and you get a huge emotional investment.
That's right, yeah.
From the characters. Maybe less than Up because this one really benefits from you having like seen the other Toy Stories to appreciate it, but still I was like, wow, like it started off great and then it went not as much as I would have liked.
Right.
The only problem I have with Bo Peep's screen time is that every second she's on screen, it's one less second for Buzz.
Yeah. I had a feeling you'd say something like that. But yeah, no, I hear you.
Did you feel like the thing with Jesse and the sheriff badge was forced, or did you feel like that was... Because some people online have been pointing out, like, oh, like, they're literally doing the thing that, again, the continuation is, like, replacing putting female characters in the role of a male character. It's like, oh, we're literally taking away, Woody's sheriff status for the sake of a female character.
Yeah, I didn't mind it. Now, to be fair, it's interesting how really, like, that... Because, you know, so, and I'm sure you've heard of this before, but, you know, in storytelling, you have this kind of rule of threes, right? Where you have a setup, you have a reminder, and then you have a payoff, right? And to me, unless, once again, I'm missing something here, the whole Jesse Sheriff thing we see once at the beginning when Bonnie's playing with the toys. And then it seems to me like we don't see that much else until the end, where Woody takes off the sheriff badge and gives it to Jesse. So I liked it. I thought it was a nice moment. But yeah, it might have been more impactful if we got a little more about that. And really, in this case, I mean, did it feel a little bit forced? Maybe. But it also makes sense, too, because we see like how Bonnie likes playing with Jesse.
She's a little girl.
Exactly, yeah.
It makes total sense that she would want to have the girl doll be the cowboy sheriff or cowgirl sheriff instead of the...
I thought it was fine because it didn't seem to me some movies when they have an agenda, when they have something that they're trying to push, it's almost like they're kind of like beating you over the head with it. It's like, here's the thing we want you to notice. Did you notice it? Good. And just in case you forgot, here's another reminder. Like, they seem to be very, very heavy with that. But here, it was just very much like you see it once at the beginning and then you see it once at the end. And you're like, well, we saw it visually. They showed us how Bonnie likes playing with Jesse more than she does with Woody. So, yeah, it might have been more impactful if they spent a little more time with it. But then maybe that way it might have also felt a bit more forced.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it made sense because she's a female.
Yeah.
So naturally she wants to have the female character be in the role of the authority role. So
yep.
It didn't... It just reminded me of how little Jessie has to do in the movie.
Yeah, and to be fair, if Jessie had lines where she's like, "Oh, let the men do the work" or something like that, I feel like she could have done more that might have made that more forced. But the fact that like Woody gives it to her because he sees how Bonnie's been playing with her, it seemed very much like less, it just felt like it did feel fairly genuine that Woody's like, this makes sense. You're the sheriff now. I'm a lost toy.
Perhaps Toy Story is something I shouldn't put too much thought into. Maybe because like, if he's having trouble adjusting to a new kid, he should have just asked Jessie, "How did you do it?" Because that's
possibly
Jessie's on her like third kid now, so she obviously knows
how to make that's a fair point actually.
She knows how to make that transition. But anyway, I'm thinking about it too much. Let's just jump over to final thoughts now.
Yeah.
So Toy Story 4, for all the nitpicks and kind of complaints I have about it, it's still a really fun movie. Mm-hmm. It's really impressive how they continually find new ways to explore the life of a toy. And, they've introduced new types of toys in this movie. You've got, like, sandbox toys and antique store toys. And
the carnival
toys.
Yep.
And I'm just like, these people are so creative to constantly find new ways to explore, these. I'm like, surely by the fourth time they've run out of stories they can tell about toys.
Yeah.
Obviously not. Mm-hmm. Do I agree with all the story decisions and the way they chose to use some of the characters? No, I have issues with them that I talked about in spoilers, and I think that impacts my overall enjoyment of the movie. Mm-hmm. So after the thought, well, no, I'll let you hear your final thoughts, and then we'll do a back cookie rating.
Okay, sounds good. For me, I was really nervous about this movie. and I was happy. I was happily impressed with it. I thought it was really good. I still like the other Toy Story movies better, but this was better than I was expecting, which is really great. I love the emotional weight and the depth to the characters and to the story. It did not seem like a cop-out. It seemed like they were really trying to bring the level of quality from the other movies, which was really great. I love the new characters. I love the differences, even though sometimes I kind of want what I've seen in other Toy Story movies before, but I liked that it did try to do something different with Gabby Gabby, that it did try and do something different with having a kind of different finale as opposed to the big action scene that we're used to. But yeah, another bittersweet ending, but really this is just another movie that reminds me that Pixar is truly incredible at what they do, and I'm so excited to see what other Pixar movies come out in the next few years. So yeah, I was very, very... very satisfied with Toy Story 4.
So I'm going to give it 2.8 out of 4 Bat Cookies.
Ooh. I'm going to give it... now, should I be doing like...
do both, because you do your IMDb rating.
Oh,
but
okay.
But then you also need to give it a Bat Cookie rating.
Right, yeah. So my IMDb rating, 8 out of 10. But my Bat Jar Cookie rating, because I can get in between numbers there, I would say... probably like 3.25, 3.3, somewhere around that, just to say that it's, if I could do like specific IMDb ratings, like slightly more than an 8 but less than a 9, I'd give it like an 8.25. So however that's equivalent to the Bat Jar Cookie rating system. So 3.25 out of 4 for me.
Let's
very,
just round
very
it to
happy.
3.3.
Sure, 3.3 out of 4 for me.
So Toy Story 4 is now in theaters. You can go see it. If you have any enjoyment of the previous films, you should at least check it out. Like I said, at the very least, so that you can, have your own opinion about it. Because as Ben Movie Buff and I have shown, like, you can have different reactions to this movie.
Yes, and please, please, please stay until the very end of the movie. Even when you think the movie is done, just watch it until the very last frame, because there is a little fun thing that they had at the very end of the movie.
See, I didn't do that.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you about it when we're done this. But yeah, please stay until the very end of the movie. There's a fun little thing there.
So it's time to go into the Bat Jar and look at our mail. Yeah. And now that you're a regular, Ben, you get to choose what your gimmick is going to be. So like Asian John's gimmick was that he always intentionally screwed up the final line of the pitch.
Okay.
And we could never get in unison on wanting people inside the Bat Jar.
Right.
Pixel Patch's thing seemed to be that he always was trying to think of new ways for people to send us mail.
Okay.
He was often talking about like things like carrier pigeons and the like.
Oh, right.
So we don't have any mail this week,
right,
unfortunately. So what that means is we need to remind the people how to get a hold of us, because we want to answer your questions, guys. We want to hear what you have to say. So, Ben, why don't you remind them how they can get a hold of us?
All right. So, if you want to contact the show with a question or an idea for an episode, you can send us an email to
batjarpodcast@gmail.com.
Or you can tweet us at
The Bat Cookie Jar.
We are available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, SoundCloud, or wherever you get your podcasts. Share our posts on Facebook and make sure to like our page, because we want everyone to join us inside the Bat Jar.
Is that going to be your thing? Just doing
that was the only thing that came to mind when I was reading. I was like, what do I do? Sound like Batman.
Well,
we'll see.
And you can subscribe to us on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel where you can essentially watch our episodes as they go on up there. Of course, Ben the Movie Buff has his YouTube channel separately, so you guys can subscribe to both channels, get double the content. Your new video is out on behavior at the movie theaters, and I was just like, as I was watching, I was kind of just like applauding. I was like,
oh, thank you.
I'm like, Cineplex, hire this guy, put his videos up there.
Yeah, that's right. Let me tell you, audience, how to watch this movie.
Yeah, so if you haven't checked that out yet and you want to learn about how to behave at the movie theaters, you should go watch that on Ben Movie Buff's YouTube channel.
Please and thank you.
This is, of course, normally when we would go into the Bat Jar and find a topic to talk about next time. This episode is going to go out on Canada Day.
Oh, cool.
So for all of our Canadian listeners, happy Canada Day.
Yep.
For those of you who aren't Canadian, maybe you're in the States, other parts of the world. If you're in the States, of course, your Independence Day is coming up. Mm-hmm. And because your Independence Day is coming out at the end of the week, the new hot ticket movie is coming out on a Tuesday. Mm-hmm. So the day after this, when this happens, and that you're listening to this, and if you listen to it the day it comes out, some people don't.
Yeah.
But if you're listening to this the day it's released, tomorrow will be the release of Spider-Man: Far From Home.
Oh, yeah.
The first reviews, at the time we're recording, the first reviews for the movie are out, looking like it's pretty positive.
Yep.
Which is exciting for me because Spider-Man, I'm biased. Spider-Man's my favorite Marvel character.
He's awesome.
So I'm really looking forward to it. And next week's episode will introduce the other, we'll call them permanent hosts during this sabbatical of, there's still a little bit of power left in the sword. I need to transfer over to them. So come back to the Batjar podcast next week when we talk about Spider-Man Far From Home. And Ben the Movie Buff, you'll be back maybe in 2 weeks. If your baby comes sooner, probably not.
Yeah, we'll see. But I'll be back at some point for sure. I'll make some time.
Until next time, I'm Average Joe.
I'm Ben the Movie Buff.
Catch you on the flip side.
See you in the next one.